Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are diving deep into the life, the methods, and the absolutely massive legacy of Frank Charles Laubach. He was an American Congregational missionary, an educator, and a true pioneer of adult education who held on to this fundamental belief that learning to read could utterly transform not just one individual, but entire communities.
So let's jump right into it. Over 100. Think about the staggering scale of that number for a second. We're talking about more than 100 countries across the globe that were eventually reached by his adult literacy methods. That is a global footprint that literally changed millions of lives. But, to understand how we get to a number this huge, we really have to look at the man who started it all.
Because of this massive global impact, Frank Laubach earned a pretty epic historical nickname, the Apostle of Literacy. And it's a fascinating contrast, really. On one hand, you have the phenomenal global success of millions of adults finally gaining the ability to read, often actually starting their educational journey with the Bible and other texts that were meaningful to their local communities. And on the other hand, you have the fact that this entire world-spanning movement started with just one man's incredibly focused mission in a remote part of the world.
Section 1. Mission to the Philippines. Where it all began. Let's quickly breeze through his timeline to ground us in the history. Born in 1884 in Benton, Pennsylvania, Frank grew up in a Christian family where faith, education, and service were just deeply ingrained in him. He had an absolute voracious love for learning. Just look at his educational background in the early 1900s. He did his undergrad at Princeton, got his theological training at Union Theological Seminary, and did even further academic study at Columbia University. That is a stacked Ivy League resume. But he didn't stay in the ivory tower. In 1915, fully prepared for his calling, he and his wife, Effa Jane, traveled to the Philippines as missionaries, and he would dedicate his entire life to this work until he passed away in 1970.
When Laubach arrived, stationed to work with the predominantly Muslim Mindanao people, he adopted a completely radical core philosophy for the time. Instead of the hostility and prejudice that was unfortunately pretty typical of that historical era, he radically flipped the script. He completely devoted himself to deeply, empathetically understanding their language, their culture, and their traditions.
Section 2. A radical spiritual shift. Deep prayer and focus.
But here is where we hit the narrative tension. Despite his empathetic approach, his early ministry actually produced almost zero visible results. Driven into intense prayer by profound frustration, he experienced this massive spiritual awakening. He realized he needed an internal transformation before he could ever hope to create external change. He set a new goal for himself, which is captured perfectly right here: to learn how to live so that God is in every thought. Imagine the sheer internal discipline required for a goal like that. He was actively trying to cultivate a continual, unbroken awareness of God's presence throughout his normal, daily, ordinary life.
And this wasn't just a passing phase either. It was a lifelong commitment. He wrote, "I choose to make the rest of my life an experiment in answering this question. What would happen if we thought about God all the time?" This intense internal focus didn't isolate him from the world, though. Actually, quite the opposite. It became the absolute bedrock foundation for all of his external missionary work, all those incredible educational innovations, and his personal writings.
Out of this deep spiritual discipline came a series of highly successful devotional writings. He authored several influential books on Christian spirituality, like Letters by a Modern Mystic, The Game with Minutes, and Prayer, the Mightiest Force in the World. Laubach firmly believed that prayer wasn't just some optional add-on to your day. As he famously put it, prayer is not an appendix to life, but life itself, and he genuinely viewed it as the most powerful force in the world.
Section 3. Each one teach one. A grassroots strategy. Okay, let's shift gears, because here is where his massive external innovation kicks in. We can call this the Mindanao realization. While serving in the Mindanao region, Laubach came face to face with a staggering bottleneck: widespread adult illiteracy. Vast numbers of adults couldn't read. And traditional schooling, which relies entirely on highly trained professional teachers, simply could not scale fast enough. The math just didn't work. There were way too many students and nowhere near enough teachers.
To solve this, Laubach developed a brutally simple but completely genius methodology. Step 1, you learn to read. Step 2, you immediately turn around and teach one other person. Step 3, you watch the process multiply. This brilliantly illustrates the viral nature of his solution. He essentially created a self-sustaining educational chain reaction.
You've probably heard the phrase, this became known globally as each one teach one. It's a grassroots strategy that entirely bypassed the need for expensive infrastructure and legions of professional teachers.
By empowering the very first person who learned to read to immediately become an educator themselves, literacy was able to spread through entire communities like wildfire. This single, elegant idea turned into literally one of the most successful adult literacy strategies in world history.
Section 4. A worldwide literacy legacy. Global expansion.
Laubach's methods quickly caught intense international attention. Over the following decades, his literacy campaigns exploded across Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europe, and the Middle East. And he didn't do this in a vacuum. He actively collaborated with governments, with churches, and with international educational organizations to push this grassroots system as far and wide as possible. So what does this all mean? The crucial point is this final outcome. Millions. Millions of people, across more than 100 countries, learned to read because of methods directly inspired by Frank Laubach. He gave adults the dignity of literacy, proving once and for all that education is a profoundly powerful expression of love and service to humanity.
To wrap up, the core lessons of his legacy are crystal clear. In education, he proved that learning empowers individuals, families, and communities globally. In ministry, he showed exactly how to beautifully combine spiritual goals with highly practical, immediate social service. And in culture, he demonstrated that real trust is built by deeply respecting human dignity, local language, and traditions. He proved beyond a doubt that sharing the gospel and performing small, simple acts of teaching can genuinely multiply into massive global change. Which brings us to our final provocative thought. Frank Laubach believed in the compounding power of sharing what you know. He proved that you do not need to be a professional to change a life. So, I'll leave you with this question. What small skill could you pass on today? If you apply that each one teach one mindset to your own life right now, whose world could you change? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this sparks a desire to go out and teach someone something new today. See you next time.